Ukraine didn't survive on miracles. It survived because its enemy carries a fatal weakness, a system that punishes truth, rewards theater, and turns strength into scrap. Russia began with more of everything: men, tanks, money, but from Putin's desk to the last trench, bad assumptions, broken feedback, and corruption kept converting advantage into failure. I'm Elvira Bary, a writer born in the Soviet Union. In this video, I'll trace the chain of failure from showcase power to battlefield performance and show how a military that can't learn fast can't win fast. Before we start, one question for you. What's the single weakest link in Russia's war machine? Leadership, logistics, or corruption? I'll pin the sharpest answer. Now, let's begin at the top. The decapitation plan that was supposed to take Kiev in days and why it began to fail in hours. Strategic errors and false assumptions. When a side has far more resources yet keeps failing, the simplest explanation is that it is not applying those resources in the right amounts at the right time in the right place. And that's what you see in Russia today. Moscow's initial plan was a decapitation strike. Airborne troops grabbing an airfield near Kiev, columns racing in, the government collapsing before the world could react. That plan depended on speed, secrecy, and docile opponent. It failed on all three. The helicopter assault on Hostomel airport met organized resistance. Ukrainian artillery created the runway, and the air bridge never opened. Without that bridge, columns from Belarus stretched into an inflexible 40-mile traffic jam, vulnerable to ambushes and simple logistics failure. Fuel, food, tires, recovery vehicles. Once the timetable slipped, there was no workable plan B. The deeper mistake was cognitive. Intelligence and political assumptions told the Kremlin that Ukrainians would not fight hard and that the West would stay on the sidelines. Both proved wrong. On the ground, you can hear the miscalculation in soldiers' own words. Intercepted calls show surprise at organized resistance, confusion about orders, and a realization that the fight would be neither brief nor easy. Some units carried their full-dress uniforms with them for a planned parade on Kreshchatyk, the main street of Kiev, but only a 3-day supply of food and water. The Supreme Command believed no more would be needed. An error of that scale became possible because of the system's confirmation bias. When the top wants good news only, bad news dies on the way up. Orders are crafted to please the boss, not to solve the problem on the ground. The job of subordinates becomes producing paperwork that shows the task is on track, not fixing what's off track, because senior officials rarely meet the people at the sharp end. Meaningful verification across agencies, regions, and units at once barely exists. Showcase power. Before the invasion, Putin invested heavily in image. An army staged to awe foreign audiences with choreographed parades and glossy weapons exposed. The show worked. Marketing matters in war. It makes the opponent hesitate and wonder whether resistance would prove futile. That belief shaped Western caution in the early months. Many governments treated Russia as a fearsome military. But exercises and stagecraft aren't combat. Once the columns crossed the border, the myth met reality. The gap between showcase and real power showed up in the first days of the invasion. Units rolled in with radios they could not secure and resorted to cell phones. Ukrainians listened, geolocated, and struck. Combined arms timing broke down because artillery, engineers, and maneuver units were not rehearsed to replan on contact. Logistics assumed rails and roads would be safe. Once convoys bunched, a handful of blown bridges and artillery fire turned the armored columns into scrap. The showcase mentality also distorts resource flow. Money and attention chase prestige systems. Unglamorous enablers, encrypted comms, field repair, Medevac tires, arrive late or in the wrong quantities. The result is an army that can advertise modernity but struggles to act faster than the opponent. When failure becomes visible, the instinct is to punish the messenger rather than fix the defect. That slows adaptation and repeats avoidable losses. This isn't to say Russia hasn't learned anything. It has improved electronic warfare, scaled guided bombs, and hardened defenses. But the core bottleneck is informational. Leaders do not reliably receive ground truth quickly enough to change course. In war, that delay is lethal. Corruption. Corruption is not a side story. It's a force multiplier for failure. Start at the top of the supply chain. In 2024-2025, Russian investigators arrested a string of senior defense officials, among them Deputy Defense Minister Timur Imanov, the General Staff's Deputy Chief Vadim Shamarin, and Personal Chief Lieutenant General Yuri Kuznetsov, on major bribery and embezzlement charges. These cases expose how wartime contracts and property portfolios turn defense management into a profit center. Move one rank down to fortifications. In Kursk and other regions, prosecutors allege millions siphoned from Dragon's Teeth and trench projects, with shoddy works left unfinished while invoices cleared. These gaps translate into casualties when defenses crumble under pressure. Then zoom all the way to the platoon. Investigations by independent outlets describe a tariff sheet for survival. Pay to transfer away from a hot sector. Pay for leave. Pay to dodge a suicidal assault. Some soldiers have literally bribed their way off the line. Others say the cash simply changes who goes first. Even if individual stories vary, the signal is consistent. When commanders can monetize fear, tactical decisions degrade. Corruption makes every other problem worse. Logistics shortfalls become chronic when parts budgets leak. Training shortcuts become incentives when inspections can be bought. And reporting rot when the real numbers would threaten someone's side income. In a system like that, more resources don't fix outcomes. They just raise the stakes. Personnel and training. Modern armies run on junior leaders. Russia entered the war with a thin, underpowered, non-commissioned officer corps and a habit of reserving decision-making for the top. That shows up in two ways. First, battalion tactical groups, Russia's pre-war modular unit for rapid operations, were built to perform scripted tasks with heavy enablers attached, not to adapt in a contact. Second, the culture around initiative is brittle. When things go wrong, the safest move for a commander is to ask permission or wait for orders. Independent assessments reach the same diagnosis. Russia's system historically resists decentralized decision-making, and its NCOs have limited authority in training and in the field. Analysts who followed BTGs in Syria and the Donbass expected coordination problems in larger wars, and the invasion of Ukraine validated those concerns. When companies lost officers to artillery and drones, capable surgeons were rare. That meant platoons sat until someone higher up cleared a change of plan. In a war where drones shrink decision cycles to minutes, those minutes cost lives. You can hear the strain in frontline voices. Intercepted calls collected by reporters include men asking families for ways to get out, or simply describing how orders kept coming even when the situation had clearly changed. A volunteer told ice stories that his training was 2 weeks and that he learned more from watching Ukrainian Azov tutorials on YouTube than from his own instructors. He describes punishment pits, beatings, and a pattern: if you push back, they send you forward. Penal detachments and barrier units reintroduced in 2023 deepened the message. Men punished for drinking, insubordination, or refusing suicidal missions were grouped and thrown into the hardest sectors. Regular troops who tried to pull back risked being shot by anti-retreat elements. Even if cases differ by unit, the signal is unmistakable to anyone in a trench. It's safer to obey a bad order than to improvise a more reasonable course of action and get blamed if it fails. Logistics, maintenance, and Medevac. The Russian military logistics is built around rail hubs and short road lifts, which works on paper but becomes fragile under precision fire. Once Russia withdrew from half of the Ukrainian territory it controlled, resupply improved, but at a cost. Depots moved farther back and split up after HIMARS started cooking ammunition stacks. That reduced the impact but also slowed throughput to units already burning ammo at World War I rates. The more precise the battlefield becomes, the more its boring parts matter. Tires, for instance. But storage and pressure practices turn heavy trucks into immobile targets, and nothing moves without trucks. Tactical logistics nodes now live under drones and counter-battery radars. In this new reality, big visible stockpiles and predictable routes invite trouble. Medevac is the other half of sustainment. Field reporting from the past 2 years highlights a grim pattern. Both sides adapted with dispersion and underground care, but Russian frontline units are often slower to recover wounded and dead, and prioritize those who can self-recover. That fits a loop of low morale and fewer men willing to push forward. Technology. In the first weeks of war, Russia failed to kill Ukrainians' mobile SAMs and never achieved classic air superiority. That pushes both sides into an environment where jets are mainly used for glide bombing, while the real reconnaissance strike complex is built from drones and artillery. Electronic warfare now shapes everything from a platoon's radio check to a corps' offensive timing. Jamming is so pervasive that both sides sometimes blind their own assets. Over the past 2 years, Russian units fielded more and better jammers. Ukraine countered with new frequencies, autonomy, and increasingly fiber optic drones whose smooth tether makes classical RF jamming irrelevant. Personal testimonies put flesh on the trend. Soldiers describe nights where the sky buzzes and radios are alive with static. A junior officer talks about switching to runners and paper maps after the EW surge. After Russia's infamous Makeyev Colossus, even the Ministry of Defense publicly blamed banned cell phone use. In interviews, drone operators on both sides describe a Darwinian cycle. What works this month dies next month. The side that updates TTPs faster lives longer. Russia has strengths here. Abundant EW, scaled drone production, including domesticated Shaheds, and relentless glide bomb use. But the failure to win the air and the information lag from poor communication forces a reactive posture. When your UAV team finds a target and your fires net can't clear a shot before the enemy moves, you are losing the seconds that define this war. Manpower. Russia can recruit bodies. Turning them into cohesive small units is harder. The 2022 mobilization produced large numbers of minimally trained soldiers who were drafted forcibly and often lacked morale. They are bundled together into storm groups that are treated as expendable meat, rushed against fortified positions. Rotation and recovery are inconsistent. When Medevac is slow and rest rare, the willingness to take risks drops. Officers die at high rates, and Jamestown's assessments warn of widening leadership gaps. Casualties are contested, but even conservative tallies run into six figures. The British intelligence estimates total Russian killed and wounded around or above the 1 million mark by mid 2025. High loss rates feed back into training shortcuts and just good enough replacements. Demography adds a hard ceiling. Russia's 1990s to 2000s birth drought means few 20-somethings today. Rostat's own series shows births at multi-decade lows. A country of 146 million can still field large forces, but sustain high-quality replacements, men with the health, education, and time to train into competent small unit leaders, are scarcer than a head count suggests. War accelerates that scarcity. The result is familiar from other empires in decline: a big manpower pool that refills trenches but struggles to regenerate competence. That is not a path to decisive victory against a motivated defender backed by allied training and tech. Economy. In May 2024, Vladimir Putin replaced Sergei Shoigu as Minister of Defense with economist Andrei Belousov, explicitly to squeeze every ruble of effect from defense spending. Belousov's own words were revealing. Optimize account, mobilize the economy, but he did not promise miracles. The policy shift acknowledged a reality the Kremlin can't fully say aloud. Russia still relies on foreign machinery, electronics, and materials, and that dependence constrains output in critical nodes. Sanctions did not stop production, they rerouted it and raised costs. European and US latest packages tightened pressure on banks, machine tools, and battlefield inputs, while US Treasury actions targeted the middlemen who launder payments and transship chips. Trade with China became the main industrial lifeline, even as secondary sanctions began to gum up payments and slow growth. Official Chinese custom tallies show 2024 bilateral trade rising only marginally after a dramatic 2023 surge. Imports still flow, but with more friction, uncertainty, and risk pricing. On the shop floor, import substitution remains uneven. Investigators repeatedly find Western microelectronics inside Russian missiles, drones, and aircraft avionics. Conflict armament research documented Russia's home-built Geraň 2 Shahed 136 variants using foreign parts, and Reuters uncovered Chinese-made engines, relabeled as cooling units en route to Russian drone producers. The system works until it doesn't. A single missing optical component or chip can idle a line that official press releases claim is fully localized. Personal testimonies show the human texture of these workarounds. In Tatarstan's Alabuga zone, center of Russia's Shahed program, state TV has shown teenagers on assembly lines. Research nonprofits interviewed foreign recruits and vocational students who said they were lured by study or hospitality jobs, then found themselves underpaid and assembling drones under strict surveillance. When labor is scarce, the factory stretches definitions. Students become workers. Practice becomes throughput. A system built on coercion and improvisation can hit monthly targets. It struggles to cultivate the craft and quality control that modern munitions need. Political constraints. Russia's problem with mobilizing society for war is that coercion substitutes for trust. Since March 2022, fake news laws have made it a crime to contradict the Ministry of Defense, with penalties up to 15 years. The censors have spent heavily to harden Russia's sovereign internet, squeezing VPNs and blocking platforms. In practice, that quiets criticism but also blinds the state to its own errors. Commanders fear reporting failures. Regional bosses fear admitting gaps. Families fear speaking publicly about the dead and wounded. The first reaction to war inside Russia was shock, then adjustment. Since then, the prevailing mood settled into "we are fine, the war is somewhere far away," the kind of normalcy where families still take children to Crimea for a summer vacation, believing nothing will touch them. Public declarations of fervent support often read as self-protection. "I don't want trouble," rather than a personal stake in occupying Ukrainian land. The idea of sacrificing everything to topple a neighbor's government doesn't resonate with most Russians. They may enjoy the television promise of national greatness, but that feeling evaporates when the costs are funerals of close ones or a shrinking paycheck. As a result, few men volunteer to join the military, and society resists refitting daily life for total war. Money remains the only reliable incentive for mobilization, as the small cohort of Russian nationalists willing to die for conquest burned through quickly. In response, the state tightened the legal machinery of mobilization, introducing an electronic summons system and a unified conscript registry. On paper, this closes loopholes. In reality, it also deepens resentment and evasion. International cooperation. Russia's failures are only half the answer. The other half is a global coalition that helped Ukraine. By June 2025, the UK-led Operation Interfax had trained over 56,000 Ukrainian soldiers. The UN's mission reported more than 78,000 trained across infantry, engineers, medics, and niche skills. Western kit mattered too, especially when paired with Ukrainian improvisation. HIMARS broke the first Russian depot system, forcing dispersal and slowing throughput. Later, ATACMS stretched the reach into occupied Crimea. F-16s and Mirage jets arriving from European partners push Russia to keep its best aircraft farther from the line and complicate glide bombing runs. Meanwhile, Ukraine's domestic drone sector exploded, producing deep strike, one way for the oil and railway targets, and cheap FPVs for the trench war. At sea, uncrewed surface vessels and precision strikes forced the Black Sea Fleet to redeploy east, degrading Russia's blockade and helping reopen Ukraine's coastal shipping lane. Grain exports rebounded despite attacks on Odessa. Western and Ukrainian assessments say the Russian fleet has lost a substantial fraction of its combat power. Money underwrites all of this. The EU looked in a 50 billion euros multi-year facility. The US supplemental in April 2024 added $61 billion after a long congressional fight. Those packages buy air defenses, ammo, spares, and time, especially time for Ukrainian industry to stand up serial production of drones and munitions. If this made the picture clearer, help someone else see it. Like this video, share it with one person who still thinks numbers always win. Subscribe if you are new. To keep this work independent, you can join the think tank, buy me a coffee, tip via PayPal, or use Super Thanks. Before you go, add your voice. Why do you think the Russian military performed so poorly in Ukraine? Leadership, logistics, corruption, or something else? Your comment sharpens the analysis and helps this reach more people who need it. I honor everyone who supports this channel. All Super Thanks names appear in the closing credits. Thank you for giving me the freedom to tell this story as it is.